China needs a market. It's being closed out of the US and European markets. We are the single largest untapped market in the world today. So they need us.
Wang said that the purpose of his visit here was for the special representative stocks. Special representative stocks is for the border, but he ended up discussing the economy, which means that they need this, which is why they initiated this. And another good reason was that, okay, the SCO meeting is coming up, so Prime Minister Modi is going to go. But even if it's the SCO, let's not forget that it was Russia which got India in to the SCO, while China supported Pakistan.
Trade and tariff is just, I think, is the beginning of the real geostrategic asymmetries. We are going into, a much more black hole as far as IR is concerned, and that's waiting for us. And we should worry most of us actually.
What the US is doing and has done two things. One, it is, I think, virtually destroyed or almost destroyed the relationship that was built up over 20-25 years with a lot of effort.
Russia is a time-tested friend, and that's precisely because of the US. 1971, 1998, Devyani Khobragade incident, so on. The trust with the US was never really 100% there. And India has always spoken about strategic neutrality. Every country does that actually.
By going in for the RIC, particularly at this point where all that is happening, we should not lose sight of. We will be actually putting our eggs in one basket, and to that extent, adversely impacting our strategic autonomy. Whereas we can still move between the West and the East and all that. Once you join the RIC again, the old, demons will arise.
You're on StratNews Global, and I'm Surya Gangadharan. Welcome to our Roundtable, a series of conversations with people in various fields, focusing on foreign policy, security, and of course, tech. Today, our issue is China, and we have a stellar panel here. Jayadeva Ranade at the Center for China Analysis and Strategy. He's also a former external intelligence officer, so he knows China very well. Professor Aravind Yelery of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Center for East Asian Studies, and Professor Sriparna Pathak of Jindal Global University. I have one question for all three of you. Given recent developments and the outreach to China that we have made, what is your reading of this outreach? It does tend to give an impression in some quarters that we lack leverage. We're seeking support from some quarters that are frankly inimical to us. Jayadeva Ranade?
That is a common perception, Surya, what you said. But I'd just like to point out a couple of, shall I say, correctives. Firstly, the outreach or the signals for a thaw came about 9 months ago when the Chinese agreed to start discussing a disengagement in the Depsang Plains and Demchok. So I think it's not just rooted in the current. That's the first point. The second, I think it's not so much a question of seeking support as it is a question of focusing on our economic development. And for that, China, as you know, we are dependent on it for a number of supplies. We were restrictive in our, allowing Chinese companies to come in here, Chinese funding to come in here. That, yes, we have, the talks indicate that we are going to ease some of them, in addition to the visas and the resumption of flights. Some FDI investments are going to be re-examined, things like this. And I think that is not so much of seeking support or as both countries looking to enhance economic development. China needs a market. It's being closed out of the US and European markets. We are the single largest untapped market in the world today. So they need us. As far as we are concerned, we are dependent on them for a lot of raw materials, etc., which unfortunately we should have made, but we haven't. But I think that's the way I'd look at it. Of course, there are signals being sent. What the US is doing and has done two things. One, it is, I think, virtually destroyed or almost destroyed the relationship that was built up over 20-25 years with a lot of effort. And the naysayers for that relationship in India have again started pointing fingers and saying, well, you know that we had warned you how the Americans will behave. And the second is that, they are sort of now questioning the value of having a relationship with India. And I think there are a lot of factors there, but I'm sure we'll be discussing this.
Professor Yelery?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show. There has been always an economic logic, the way the supply chains are spread out and production lines are spread out. And the recent problem of tariffs is not only, disturbing the rest of the world, but also is disturbing the American institutional and structural approach to the industries. You would see that most of these approaches have been harming the American companies also. You take the chip making companies or other companies into advanced value added sector. And while this happens, all these chains are disturbed. It is going to create an alternative for emerging economies. And again, I would like to take the point which Sir had just mentioned. India has been looking for markets and expansion in Russia and China both. Our anxiety is not only about trade deficit, but also having an access to in these countries. For example, Russia is importing a lot of milk powder, which we can provide it, but the issue is with the residue factor. So the same with China also. China is importing a lot of things which India can provide. The question is actually, can we take leverage of this situation and get more access to these economies? An important thing. Are we actually running after these two economies after what happened after Trump imposing extra tariffs on us? I don't really put into that sequence. As Sir said correctly, we have been looking for opportunities to engage with the neighboring Asian economies for some time now. What we were trying to do, we were trying to maybe looking for relative benefit. We were always considering what the US administration thinks of us, maybe how they would react it. But now we have seen the reactions. We are actually, it makes case easier for us to look for our opportunities in a much more, open and, in transparent way. And that's what I see it.
Sriparna?
I won't agree that there was an outreach from India to China. I see it the other way around. Otherwise, if the outreach was from India, then our minister or our head of state would have gone to the PRC. But the fact is that Wang came here. The outreach was from their side. And there are a lot of reasons as to why China wants the Indian market right now. First, to begin with, India is the world's fastest growing major economy, contrary to Donald Trump's imaginations, of course. So given the fact that China is suffering deeply because of Donald Trump's tariffs, other sorts of measures from other Western countries and some of our partners, including Japan, etc., China needs a market which can absorb certain of its goods. India is the best. Now, look, Wang said that the purpose of his visit here was for the special representative stocks. Special representative stocks is for the border, but he ended up discussing the economy, which means that they need this, which is why they initiated this. And another good reason was that, okay, the SCO meeting is coming up, so Prime Minister Modi is going to go. But even if it's the SCO, let's not forget that it was Russia which got India in to the SCO, while China supported Pakistan. So while there's a lot of hullabaloo going around right now, warming up and ties, it's not like India has forgotten history. It's all too recent in the past. But yes, if a particular country, which happens to be a neighbor, with which we have power differentials, wants to engage in dialogue, sure, why not? India has never said no to any of it with any country, even Pakistan for that matter, before Operation Sindoor and before Pahalgam. So it's the Chinese economy's needs, which is why they have reached out. And for us, Atithi Devo Bhava, sure, why not?
I'd like to bring in my colleague Ramanan Sengupta. Ram?
Yeah, I quite agree with you, Dr. Pathak, that because I've been noticing a lot of these major outreach from the embassy here, from the Chinese embassy for a while now, trying to connect with us and think. But I'm going to ask you a separate question for all of you. Given the current situation vis-a-vis the US, does it make sense for us to join the, Russia, India, China perspective that they've been pushing us to do?
Again, very interesting question. And look, as you correctly said, there's a lot of outreach happening since last year from the Chinese embassy, especially since the new ambassador took office. And it's all to placate India because if you see historical patterns, it's always happened this way that, China makes this outreach. There's a lot of attempt to placate the Indian side and exploit, the economy or other things. And then there's a military escalation or any other economic sort of escalation. Are we in for the RIC? Russia is a time-tested friend. And that's precisely because of the US, 1971, 1998, Devyani Khobragade incident, so on. The trust with the US was never really 100% there. And India has always spoken about strategic neutrality. Every country does that, actually. So coming back to the fact, would we choose an RIC? I think our MEA has also stated this, that there's no format decided for this and there's no date decided for this. So it's a very tacit way of saying that we are not in for this. Some of the things in Indian diplomacy can't be stated out loud. So there are these sorts of ways. Even in the last 3 weeks, roughly, since Donald Trump began his absolutely illogical tirades about India is, fueling Russia's war machine, hypocritical, typical of the US. What India has done is that there are a lot of these deals or agreements which are being signed with Russia, which we've already had because of it's a time-tested friend. That's not happening with the PRC. There are in principle discussions which have happened, but there's no agreement, which clearly shows that yes, we are willing to trust the Russians as we always had, but with the Chinese, that's not happening so easily.
Dr. Yelery.
Yeah, Ram, good question. So a couple of these discussions I've been part of, and Sri said correctly, we can trust the Russians. But that also means that, Russians are going to play an important role if that is going to be the format. Because we could be pressing Russia to deliver certain messages when that format really gets activated. When it comes to SCO and RATS also, it was Russia which was on our side. For example, when the defense minister went to Qingdao and there was no mention to April 22 incident, Russia was backing India. I mean, China was not doing it. So if that really takes place or it comes into formal format, we have to bank a lot on the Russians. Russians are well aware of this fact. The Foreign Minister Lavrov, he is well aware of this thing. He had been making trips to India and he knows that, and we have been making him understand our concerns, that we do not really outrightly deny such a format, but the problem is the intention, whether that intention is going to serve India's national interests and the strategic purpose. If that is open and clear, we are on it. But that clarity has to come from the other side.
Dr. Ranade, the same question, but I'm wondering whether it's one of the reasons is that you don't really want the Russians and the Chinese to get too close. Is that one of the reasons why we might be avoiding the RIC in some ways?
Actually, that's not the only reason, and I'll explain why. I think, we are already members of BRICS. We're already members of SCO. Do we really want to add on another
Bunch of
platforms,
acronyms.
a bunch of acronyms to the relationship? We can meet each other bilaterally, and I think, at least what I have been seeing, the place where we make some advances in the relationship, whether it's economic, whether it's strategic, whether it's diplomatic, are when we have bilateral discussions. So, I mean, maybe on the sidelines of BRICS or whatever, but there are enough opportunities for us to meet whoever we want to meet, and we have been doing it. RIC, I don't see the advantage. And let me put it in context for you. For example, we have BRICS already, where China is overwhelmingly the single economic power. The rest of us are there, but it's China which takes the lead and sets the agenda, more or less, whether it's accepted or not. The RIC will be more of the same, but with a narrower focus, where we will be one of the, the players who are being told what to do. I frankly don't see any advantage. Secondly, by going in for the RIC, particularly at this point where all that is happening, we should not lose sight of, we will be actually putting our eggs in one basket, and to that extent, adversely impacting our strategic autonomy. Whereas we can still move between the West and the East and all that. Once you join the RIC, again, the old, demons will arise. So I think it's not necessary for us to go into RIC. We have a good equation with the Russians. We are now, having some kind of a, shall I say, tactical band-aid being put on our differences with the Chinese. So I would sort of fight shy of that. And when I said tactical band-aid, I would say that the latest little, to and fro, with Jaishankar's comment on Taiwan, then the Chinese saying, no, he actually said this, and issuing fairly strong clarification after the MEA issued a clarification. That points to, in my view, the future differences that are going to come, and not in the distant future, and the Chinese unwillingness to let go of those. So, in a way, we have to stay vigilant in this relationship that is being now again, shall I say, rewarmed, if I may put it.
I want to ask a question about Russia. You mentioned time-tested partnership, and generally the consensus seems to be that Russians are the trusted guys, But if you look back, I think since 2017, I don't think we've signed any major deal with the Russians. And the impression is that the relationship has been devalued over the years. So, what's your
No deal has been signed, but we've agreed to partner more on defense, and even Russia has said that it will give us more defense artillery, and all of this is in the last 1 month or so. But why I say it's a time-tested friend is the fact that it has been able to respect the fact that India is strategically, earlier it was non-aligned, now it's strategically neutral. Those examples which I gave, 1971 is when India was practicing non-alignment. And there was a time when China, US and Pakistan were on the same side, exactly the same as today. And that is when India sent out an SOS, and the Russians or the Soviets, they agreed to help. They could have demanded a lot of things in return, saying that you should lean towards us and all of that, but they didn't. Even in the last 10 to 11 years, when there's been a tilt towards the West, particularly to the US, which now stands on very shaky grounds, even then the Russians didn't come and demand that, oh, you should give up your strategic neutrality. I know that the Russians sell a lot to the Pakistanis. That's the thing about money. It's not like India also didn't sell to some of the partners which Russia won't really want India to sell to. That's the thing about money. Unfortunately, capital matters in international politics. But then the goodwill or the attempt to not force India to give up its strategic autonomy stands important. Under Donald Trump, contrary to all expectations that were there from India and the world, he's now pushing India to give up its strategic autonomy and to kowtow as if, the US is some sort of an emperor or some sorts of things. He's using these narratives that, oh, India is friends with Russia, as if he didn't try placating Putin at all, as if he doesn't want to partner with Putin at all, So those sorts of things, the US and the West have done multiple times. Moral hectoring, trying to tacitly push their narratives. Russians haven't done that. The West says that, oh, Russia uses disinformation. Russia has done quite a lot of these things to change our policies. For India, it's never happened. It's the West which has done that, and the Chinese who have done that. Two sides of the same coin. So, which is why it's a time-tested friend. Till it doesn't stab us in the back in the ways that the US has, it stands as a time-tested friend. If it does, then yeah, my views will also change.
any other?
Briefly to come in, I want to add one more point to Shiv's the elaboration. With Russia, they weren't too much of up and downs in relationship. And whenever we approached the Russians, we approached and we were reciprocated with the equilateral responses. Those responses were measured, and as well as something which we were expecting. So the expectations were made with the reciprocal reactions. And what does that build? That built into bilateral stakeholdings here. With the US, the moment we approach and we try to build them or bring them into stakeholding, they deny it. So the deniability in stakeholding in bilateral relationship brings in a lot of trust shocks between India and US. It shouldn't have been otherwise. We keep talking about parties, democracy, and values. But that really is not the case when we try to talk to US, but is the case when we talk to Russia. And that's where this fact comes in, that, it time tested relationship. And that's exactly when the EM also made a statement, it looks like it is more stable relationship. And that's what is being indicated now.
Ram, Dr. Yelery, you were, I believe, at the BRICS summit, that happened recently. Did you get a sense that there is a sort of a disconnect about India saying we don't want to join the de-dollarization tribe as the other countries are?
So our point has been very, very clear. There is an untimely expansions of these organizations. Let's talk about the BRICS also, okay, and then SCO also. The fundamental questions behind having this multilateralism, whether that is BRICS or SCO, were different, and then we tried to solve those problems which these multilateralism started, and then suddenly the expansion takes place. So India has been quite consistent that we have facing the problems which have not resolved and why to have the expansions, and that is, I think, quite consistent with our stand since the BRICS started. Because now expansion in BRICS, if you look at the new economies that is going to create extra burden on the BRICS. That is going to create more challenges for the NDB also. How that the shares will be divided when it comes to capital, banking and extending finances also. So that means that instead of we solving the problem within the old BRICS, we are pursuing the new problems. And I think that is quite consistent stand of India, whether that is BRICS or SCO is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ranade, you have any thoughts on the de-dollarization drive?
Well, I'll just add to what he said. I think one point which maybe he focused on the economy is that in the expansion of the BRICS, if we look at the kind of countries that have been taken in, it's into BRICS and I would add SCO. It has been China selecting or bringing in its friends who are not necessarily our friends. And so that's a sort of, makes it more of an uphill thing for us to go ahead and try and push our agenda. And we saw that recently at the SCO, where the kind of language used on terrorism was in favor of Pakistan. Then we had to stage a protest. As a founding member, one of the, not founding, but as one of the original key members. So I think, we have to take into account that it's going to be an uneven playing field for us. And I think as far as I would like to make a point on Russia also, that in addition to everything else that has been said, which I agree with, we have certain relationships with Russia which have continued uninterrupted. And I think that's important. And even when we are diversifying, certain things we continue to get from Russia. And I think that's again an important point. And your third point, which was, if you could...
With that, whether we should now consider joining the de-dollarization drive.
Yeah. De-dollarization, I don't know whether we are ready for it or not. I mean, that's something that, Aravind will be able to talk about. But I think that in the world today, there is a sort of feeling that we need to move away from the dollar, not just the developing world, even the other countries, because there is too much of a dependence on the dollar. Secondly, people are beginning to question why, without making any contribution, the United States gets interest, as a credit to it when two other countries are dealing. So people are thinking of it, but there are two issues here. One, it comes down to the credibility of the country concerned, whoever you're going to select as the prime currency. And the simple question I'd ask you is that if you have savings and you have to put them somewhere, would you do it in dollars or would you do it in Chinese yuan? I think I know the answer, but so that is going to be a question. And but the first step is that you trade in either rupee or yuan, etc., which is now coming in. So I think I won't say that there is a move towards de-dollarization, but it's certainly something that people are concerned about and they're looking at. And I don't know if this cryptocurrency comes in, whether that will accelerate the pace.
see, just to add on to what he said, I'm going to shift a bit to AIIB, right? India has a 7.6% stake in it. And we want to do things in a collective way. But a lot of those projects go for CPEC, which violates India's sovereignty. We are not okay with that. If we go in for this de-dollarization thing, as Ranade sir also mentioned, are we okay with trading in yuan? We are definitely not okay with that. So, which is why even from way before Donald Trump took office, from last year November onwards, our MEA has been stating we are not for de-dollarization. Unfortunately, Trump couldn't hear that. I don't know what else. Maybe we should actually go with a trumpet and do it near his ears or something. But bullies generally don't listen. So that's the thing. India has been stating in the past that de-dollarization doesn't work for us. Not yet, because a lot of our trade also, it's still taking place in the dollar. Do we want to replace one bully with another bully? This second bully with who we have sovereign concerns, right? That's one more thing. India and Russia, again, that's the bit about time tested friend. There we are trading, we are doing the rupee ruble trade in our in our local currencies. Again, one more reason as to why we're still okay with the ruble, not with the Chinese yuan. De-dollarization, we should try to move away from it because it's got a stronghold, but we are not there yet. So till we are not there yet, we don't want a de-dollarization and Chinese yuan to come in. Even when the BRICS was getting formed, and this year after the summit, 30 more countries have said that they want to join. It helps us, of course, because we're getting more trading partners, and we are okay till there, But 30 more countries, all of us trading in yuan, that doesn't work out for us. The Chinese economy places, it's not an egalitarian relationship between India and China, even economically. Do we want to mess it further? I think the answer is no.
Time for a little short break. Don't go away. You're on Roundtable.
Without logistics, army cannot sustain. Even the frontline soldiers, they also look for logistics unless they will not be able to stand there and fight. So the logistic is a everyday challenge. In high altitude, it multiplies more because of the weather and because of terrain. Sometimes, snowfall, sudden snowfall or landslides just disrupts our plan. But we have to sustain somehow. So we look forward. We look for the different ways to provide to sustain forward troops. So we plan in that way the rotation of drivers, the rotation of vehicles, and the number of manpower will participate in kind of operations. It includes a lot of planning and foresightness. And logistic is no longer a support. It has become a strategic capability and force multiplier for modern military operations.
Welcome back. You're on Roundtable and we're discussing China. Professor Yelery, you have a point to make.
Yeah, a small technical point over here. So I think the tariff is just the beginning of US, controlling or nosing around the global supplies and production. The next thing is finance, and then the next thing is the dollar. Because if you see, the Treasury Secretary have been hinting out saying that, we are still dominant. Trump has been talking about, please don't talk about de-dollarization. Soon after the Rio summit got over, he was very upset, anxious. One has to look at the structural, the sequences over here. There is going to be federal cuts as far as, reserves are concerned, dollars are concerned. What does that mean is that dollar is going to be much more fluid and volatile in coming decades. What it also means that what we saw in 2007, global financial crisis, that was one small tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of problems are yet to come. Again, what I append with what Sri said actually. What is the alternative to dollarization? So when we talk about, too much dependence on dollarization is going to create a lot of volatilities. We should be also aware that, what are the alternatives to this? India has been consistently developing these swap agreements, but I think we have been a bit slow. We need to really take those, steps seriously to build our swaps, because, that is the institutional mechanisms to keep aside these dollars, keep aside the other dominant emerging currencies like renminbi, and then start, localizing the local currencies. In BRICS also, we have been talking about it. We are not talking about BRICS common currencies. We're talking about recirculating the local currencies, which is the quite good strategy, and I think that is going to happen. Again, the Chinese are well aware that, and they are doing de-dollarization at much more accelerated pace than others. And, in 2015, the renminbi was included into the IMF reserve currency basket. So they have already fulfilled one step and they're going a bit faster. Now, what happens now? Dollar, renminbi, international trade. I'll give you the Indian perspective. While we are trading with China, our trade with China is growing up. Essentially, what it means that, we are using dollar to trade with China. Now, China is trying to displace dollar by telling us trade with renminbi. While we're going to buy the renminbi's weight in the IMF, reserve currency basket is going to go up. So, this is the small, taps which are going to play an important role and create or exert more pressures. Trade and tariff is just, I think, is the beginning of the real geostrategic asymmetries. We are going into, a much more black hole as far as IR is concerned, and that's waiting for us. And this should worry most of us, actually.
No, the other thing that I've been thinking about is that due to the tariffs, there's a lot of countries in the global south, what we call the global south, who've been sort of watching that how are these people pushing back and how does it impact. Do you think we have lost that pace in the way we are pushing back, in the sense that Chinese have made it very clear that you guys do something, we'll right back? Have we been able to sort of set an example to the global south as to that, look, we can do it this way rather than pushing back directly?
So our agenda in global south is very clear. While we are saying no to hegemony, we are also saying no to the alternative hegemony. That message has to go very clear. So if we're talking about global systemic transitions, we are not saying yes to the another global systemic transitions where we can see a clear hierarchy, which is absolutely not true. Global south should not create a north within itself. So I think we have been consistently saying no to it. I mean, that has been our case where EM went and spoke to a couple of global south countries. We are doing a lot of things with the global south countries. In Africa, we are not only building roads which are leading to the ports, we are building schools and stadiums also. That is a real contribution to the global south, which has not been the case of the alternate powers. And I think that's where we did not deny our role. We are important player and a key stakeholder in creating global stakeholdership in the global south. But we are denying that we do not want to create a hegemony within global south. I think that message we want to give it very clearly, and I think that has been delivered so far.
Are we seen as a leader in the global south?
I would like to say that we are seen as an important stakeholder in the global south, not a leader in
And we don't aspire to that.
No, we want to. We aspire to be that. But I think the way the shifts are taking place, it is a global south. For example, recently after the debt crisis in Africa, the African countries are looking at us. Recently, TICAD happened in Yokohama in Japan. Japan and India have been seeing an important stakeholder in building the African community or African continent. Rather than just financing and creating the inverse model of financing, which will be turned into the debt traps. So we are aspiring to be an important stakeholder, but not aspiring to be a power or something which we would create a different kind of a food chain, where we want to keep or ebb out the emerging countries or the low income countries in Africa or in global south.
There are 2-3 things here. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, your question was very broad-based, but I'd sort of say that the first is the diplomatic perspective, where the African nations, there are a large number of them, and many countries want them to be with them in the United Nations and other such bodies. So that's one. And I think there, whether you call it leadership or whether you call it vanguard role is another matter, but certainly China and us are vying for that, and South Africa is another country which is now trying it within Africa. So that's one. The second is the strategic perspective, where of course China has a lead. They have the money also, but that is to exploit the rare earth and mineral resources that are available in these countries. We are latecomers to the game, but we are there. And as far as the Chinese are concerned, I think they're quite clear about it and brazen about it, that they want to exploit it. And someone mentioned here just now the roads being built. They're building it from the mines to the ports. And then, of course, the Chinese Navy steps in and says, hey, you know, we can make that into an overseas base. So, well, they've done that in one case. They may do it in others. But this is the way it's coming out. I think in Africa, America is falling behind, if it is not fallen behind, including the international institutions that exist and which are actually, shall I say, manipulated by the Americans or the Treasury Department, which are like the World Bank and IMF, etc. So I think those have been pushed away by the Chinese, who come in and with no strings attached, put a lot of money there. So that's how I see this coming. I'd like to make one more point about what which Aravind touched upon. I think what Trump is doing, I mean, apart from the tariffs, this is his first step to actually restructuring the international monetary and trading systems and to ensure that America remains on top. So at one level, he sees the Chinese challenge, but he's trying to reorganize it so that they're on the top. But I'm afraid, I don't know whether he'll succeed. But what he has done is he has upset Europe, and he's upset a lot of the other countries who till now had been favorably inclined towards the United States. And I think now they're looking at the US and questioning whether it can be a dependable partner in future. And they're not looking only at Trump. He's here for 3 years or whatever and he's gone. But after that, and they're saying the way the systems in the United States have crumbled, can America be a dependable partner? I think that's a bigger question, and as to what we are going to see. And, you know, there are 2-3 scenarios. One, that we split into blocks, I think, which is what the American effort will result in if it succeeds. The third is multipolarity, where you have Europe going its way and others with their own. So I think there are a lot of questions that are going to open up here.
Just related to all this, many years ago there was the G2 plan by the US. Do you see that getting some kind of traction nowadays?
I think the time is past. As far as the Chinese are concerned, if it's G2, it's temporary, because Xi Jinping has very clearly said at the last 3 party congresses, which are the biggest outfits in China, I mean, on deciding on policy, that by 2049 China has to be number 1. So then where does that leave the United States? Except as a minus, you know, in G2.
I wanted to answer something from, you know, the previous question very briefly. See, whenever the international system has been under extreme strain, as we see it now, 80 years war in Europe, 30 years war in Europe, First World War, Second World War, Cold War, so on, a new sort of international order or system has emerged. That's why we have all these concepts about first sovereignty and the whole concept about international norm, all of these things, bipolarity, multipolarity, unipolarity. Right now, the strains which have been caused, we already have the term or the notion of the global south, which is also new. The fact is that if India can withstand this storm, and I believe it will be able to withstand this storm wherein there are 2 bullies on the 2 sides, India comes out as a credible actor within the global south. India anyways has greater credibility than China, which is also part of the global south, in the global south. Because even in Africa, which, you know, Aravind was also mentioning, in the terms of the projects or the investments which India has, India doesn't take its own laborers. It creates employment over there, which China does not do. So it has a greater credibility to begin with. US, the lesser said, the better, right? So maybe, I think at the end of this at the end of this conundrum, there will be a more credible third choice. Now, quickly to your question, G2. You know, all the signals which are coming from Donald Trump, I tend to believe he wants a G2, but with China as a subservient partner. And that is not okay with China. What are the sorts of evidence? First, Xi Jinping was the only head of state who was invited to his swearing in. Then Trump has been fawning over Xi Jinping. Oh, he's a smart man, he's an intelligent man, you know. Then now he completely withheld the TikTok ban, which was supposed to kick in. He's not even taking money from ByteDance for that matter. Over and above, in the last 1 or 2 months, what he's also done is that he's lifted all the curbs on critical chips and those sorts of things from the US. So all sorts of signals he wants to placate the PRC and to form some sort of a G2 and they bully the world together. But with China playing a lesser role, because he possibly assumes that it's not being otherwise easy to make the Chinese bend. So, which is why through this tidbit, let's have a G2, we'll bully the world together, but you be a bit subservient. But would the Chinese agree to it? They're not okay with it. Which is why Wang and all of these things, yesterday also their Chinese envoy said, oh, we back India against US hegemony. Okay, so India gets pulled in over here also. They want to be the hegemon. China wants to be the hegemon. India doesn't like hegemony, or even if there's a hegemon, India doesn't like being bullied. So I see all tendencies of G2 in Trump. Xi Jinping, not so okay with it.
Ram?
I was interviewing a gentleman a couple of weeks back, and his question was that given the tariffs that Trump is imposing, can India sustain the pain that it will inflict? One, and B, his argument was that it's just a question of time after the tariffs actually start hitting the US because the consumer prices there will go up. So he says, just, wait till then and then you guys can do what you want because then the people will. Would you agree with that argument that?
I absolutely agree. You need to see, how calculative the tariffs are. They have excluded the medicines, the pharma sector. So it was very measured, well thought step to levy tariffs on Indian products. Now, there are two answers to this thing. First thing, can we survive or out-survive the pressure? It's a bit difficult because, Indian market or Indian producer do not have, shock absorbers or the deep pockets as the Chinese have. I mean, we do not have state or enterprises to absorb the 5 or 10%. Maximum we can absorb 7 to 8%. But 25%, then you minus 7 to 8%, where the 15% of shock being absorbed. It is difficult, not possible. It is beyond our capacities. Let's talk about textile. Textile employs about 200 million people, and which is the second largest industry in India, which is also an important factor when it comes to India's exports to US. And now, since last few years, since the US withdraw the general tariff, profits which India was accruing through that system, and the tariffs coming in, it is beyond our capacity to take that absorption. Put similar example in China. They are able to take it because they have a deep pockets, banks are there, they have multiple financial mechanisms. Some are overtly, some are covertly supporting them. So beyond the limit, we cannot take that shock. Second thing, that the repercussions in US, there are two sorts of repercussions in the US. The CPI and the inflation is drastically going to change in the US in coming few months. That means the consumer prices will go up because it's already started climbing up. And this is a capitalist state, what does that mean is producers or importers will push the last penny to the consumer, right? But there is no big. India is at least a welfare state, right? There is some way of, banks and the state will thinking, okay, we can delay it. But US will not delay it. The moment there is a prices inflation, they'll immediately pass it to the consumer. That is going to create a problem. Most of the products, let's talk about the value-added product, talk about the green techs and talk about the EVs. Most of the peripheral products and the parts are coming from outside US. That means that EVs are going to get costlier. All right. So this is going to go or pass to the consumers. That means that this is certainly not going to go well. Second part of that question, what is this doing? This is trying to distract the American enterprises. Instead of looking for the novelty in the supplies or novelty in the productions, they're looking at novelty in absorbing the shocks. What does that going to be is that structurally it is going to have a lot of impairments as far as American business are concerned. Trump may be very happy to get the manufacturing, or maybe 50% manufacturing focused in US, but he's intentionally, I'm saying intentionally, killing the innovative spirit, ideas and cycles, ecosystems, longer ecosystems and the bigger ecosystems, shorter and the longer ecosystems, he's killing it. So it is going to create a lot of problems for the US economy. And then, see the midterm results are coming out. And now he is not using the legislature to pass, he's using the executive orders to pass it. There are a lot of anomalies within the US
how this is being done. So this is not only about the economics. This is also, a major structural problem with the US. Apart from the personality problem and disorders.
I think we've almost run out of time, but can I ask a big question? I mean, based on what we just said, that, suppose Trump dials the pressure up further by revoking H-1B visas, would that add to our pain?
It is, but I know we are opening up. Recently, Taiwan announced that, it is ready to take our H-1B visa holders.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of people. There'll be a
That's
lot
right.
of people
That's right.
who'll,
So I think, US is not, I suspect, how much there is an institutional intention behind such steps. I feel these are not sustainable in the long run. Definitely not. I mean, America is not acting as a wise power. It looks like, it is acting, it is just reacting. Juvenile, yeah, maybe.
So essentially what I'm hearing is that like the Chinese are doing, their option seems to be that, okay, at the best we can wait out till this guy goes. We can just, handle the pressure. And I mean, maybe we should follow the same playbook.
Now,
Yeah. So, but the Chinese, they say something and do something else, right? They are projecting that they'll wait it out. But all of these scurries that you see, including Wang Yi's visit, is because it's not being able to take the pressure. Another thing is, since you had mentioned trade also, yesterday India announced that it's now going to invest and it's going to trade with 30 other countries in Latin America and in Africa. Yeah, maybe we should have not trusted the US in the past and done our own things. But okay, at least there's this pressure, which is why these sorts of things are now coming out. And to answer whether India will be able to withstand this pressure, should it increase, let's again compare with the PRC and the Chinese. The sorts of goods we export to the US, they're not the same as the PRC. The biggest component of India's economy is the tertiary sector, 54.5%, I think, or 7.7%. So it is not those cheap made in China sorts of goods that we export. So bring it on. US has, that's why, specifically excluded pharmaceuticals and all sorts of other things. Textiles, okay. Textiles, there is a good consumption base within India itself. China's domestic consumption is not as great, which is why it's an export-reliant economy. India is not an export-reliant economy to begin with. Our domestic consumption is what saved us from the fallouts of the global financial crisis. So at best, and I think he would be able to do this sort of regressions better, there were a couple of articles and a couple of regressions which I was reading. At best, it will hit 1% of India's GDP. Fair enough. We're still the world's fastest growing major economy. There are steps which are being taken to mitigate. And look, none of this was, no one could have foreseen this, that Trump will go on this sort of tangent and he'll be the irrational actor which China is generally thought of to be, or this revisionist power that, we generally assume China to be. So now we have two revisionist powers. So that being said, it's right now a push comes to shove sort of movement. India is trying. Tertiary sector is our, strength. As much as we might say, oh, there are no jobs, India should have had unleashed its manufacturing prowess. Maybe it was destiny's plan to land us in this situation to make us realize some things happen for the best.
I'd just like to make 2 points. One, you made a remark about China. I don't think China is just being passive about it. China has turned the screws on the United States. And when Trump began making a lot of noise, or his administration, about denying visas to Chinese students and began targeting them, the Chinese did reach out and say that, you're being unfair, etc., etc. And instead of getting them to pause and rethink, they got emboldened. And then China, just applied a comprehensive ban on rare earths. And what did you see? In 24 hours, the US capitulated. 24 hours. And Trump went on TV saying, I've always wanted the students to come here. I mean, people don't remind him about it, but that's what happened. And the Chinese haven't lifted the ban. They've said, yes, we will lift it for American companies on a case-by-case basis, subject to their filling an application form. Only one company has got it so far. So the Chinese are not a pushover. I don't think they're just going to, they'll wait it out. Yes, they are wise guys, but they're not going to not inflict pain on America. Pain is coming. And the rare earths in itself is the first step. And it is helped by the way the Chinese EV sector, whose prices now are much lower than Tesla. So I think that's one thing we need to keep in mind. And the second point I'd mention is about us. I said I think we are capable of withstanding the pain. We've been through this earlier. Our rise has started now. And according to calculations, back of the envelope calculations, between 1.5 to 2 will be the worst case scenario, impact on growth. But, you know, it also means that whereas 1 quarter we may be down, 2 quarters we may be down, but as we explore other markets, we'll compensate for it and we'll be able to move ahead. Hopefully, this is also a wake-up call to us to, rectify a lot of the, thicket of clauses that we have, and we are able to build it up. But I think we will come out of it, and the United States is already beginning to feel the pain. The prices are going up. People are quite unhappy there. I mean, I was there just last month, and there are a lot of questioning of Trump going on. May not be by his MAGA base, but they're uneducated. They're the heartland people. But when they start feeling the pinch in their pocket, they will also turn.
So I think the consensus we have is that things are not as bad as they may seem. India needs to keep its head, think through the future trajectory of its relations, whether with the major powers or with its neighborhood, and reform from within. Jayadeva Ranade, Aravind Yelery, Sriparna, thank you very much. Also my colleague Ramanand, thank you very much.
That's all we have for you in this series of the Roundtable. Do join us for further such conversations in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much.